Divine Source, Great Spirit, we're here to speak for truth. We're here to be in service for the highest good. And so it is.
Welcome to Talking Spirit. My name is Jutta, and I'm back with my lovely friend, Elisabeth.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome.
So today I got some messages around time and the importance of paying close attention to the guidance that comes in and taking the steps in the given time that is basically provided by the Spirit. You know, there's some times where maybe we're aware of these things and these steps that we're being asked to take, and we will simply take them, and it's great. And then, we can run into other times where we might want to delay following the guidance that we're hearing. And there can be cases sometimes where then the guidance comes through very strongly, even through other people towards us. And it can feel like we're being put under pressure a little bit. But yeah, there are these very important times, and I've had plenty of them on my journey and have seen it plenty with others as well. And I think, in hindsight, there are these beautiful opportunities for expansion and almost like a leveling up or a finalizing of a certain era in our journey. I'm going to shoot it over to you, Elisabeth, and excited to see where it's going to go.
A lot of my journey has been about being divested of the idea of time. And there's a lot of talk and lots of different teachings about how we actually do exist beyond time and space. And so a lot of focus went on to those kinds of meditations. It was just sort of having the idea of initiations and birthdays and sort of spiritual concepts about, when a person in Judaism might be bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, these sort of moment in time markers that we do have as being significant in our worldly lives. There's been a lot of talk recently for myself, talking with others about this maturing. We're constantly being invited to mature spiritually by the Spirit. And it seems like we're in a time-based past, present, future experience. And so, just using that as a concept is good enough. We seem to walk our path spiritually, day to day. And yet there is so much more happening beyond this linear concept that is much more complex in this way. It's simpler in this one way and much more complex in another. So there seem to be these times where there's a lot happening in the background, you might say, spiritually. And I have received very often guidance about how there seems to be something on the timeline that I need to be doing to engage with beyond the timeline, to engage with what is possible for me beyond time and space. And so I've been given lots of guidance about the importance of doing stuff that, in a way, is choosing, like choice points for my evolution spiritually, choice points to affirm, confirm, and demonstrate to the Spirit that I really do want to move forward, that I really do want the healing, that I really do want to, progress and mature spiritually. I've been sent on lots of little spirit runs, spirit errands to, again, just give demonstration. Usually those came from me going and seeking guidance and support from others. Usually it was like, I can feel like I'm hung up somewhere. I can feel like things aren't moving. I can feel like I'm out of alignment somewhere, or that I'm invited into something. And so often I'd go seeking some support from a spiritual guide, And then they would often come back with, yeah, well, this is why, or, you need to do X, Y, and Z. So in those times, I was very open-minded because I knew something was up my backside that I had to attend to. So usually in those times, it was pretty easy for me to take whatever action was being suggested. But then there are other times where it just is like, just kind of going through my day to day and still feel some sense of, spirit wants something of me, and I'm not really sure what it is. And those times, generally, I was getting messages, but they were maybe ones that I didn't really want to receive, or they maybe were ones that were kind of inconvenient, or they were maybe ones that were much more inconvenient, that were really going to require me to expand in a way that I wasn't sure I was ready for. When it comes to others, I often get used as like a fifth or sixth or seventh attempt by the spirit to get through to somebody. And so I often receive messages in a pretty intense and fierce way for people at that point because they've been denying or missing or just completely saying, forget it, I don't want to do what you want me to do, spirit. So I've seen for myself, but then I've also seen for others that I'm delivering messages for, it can get really uncomfortable if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, particularly for those of us that have already been on our path a while. It's like it's pretty hard to go back to sleep. At a certain point, you've done enough of your inner work and you've said yes enough to the spirit to then say, well, forget the spiritual path stuff. It's kind of like you don't really have a choice at a certain point, but you can stay stuck in the discomfort for as long as you want.
Yeah, I think for myself, there's been plenty of times in the past where I could definitely feel there was something big coming up seemingly, and I needed to get ready. For years, I had this age in mind where something really important was going to happen for me, and that was 33. So, I at that point I didn't feel like I was really consciously preparing for that, but when it happened, it was like, okay, this makes sense. Yeah, I felt like that was happening. So in a way, just having that year in mind that something major would happen in my life, it was almost like having allowed that information in it was kind of like preparation enough to be able to deal with what was happening, which was major, major change for me. Before I turned 33, I had a major shift in what was happening in my life. And, what I thought was a lifelong piece of my journey ended up coming to an end at that time. And I was thrown into a totally new way of being and a much deeper connection to the spirit was required then as well. It was a time of just really, really deep prayer to see, what was the guidance for me. So sometimes it can be things like that, and it's something I think that everybody will experience at one point or another, where a lot of times it's stuff that is simply a thought that just keeps coming to mind around maybe it's even different inspirations, because sometimes I've found with others that following guidance that is related to what's inspiring to us can almost be scarier than other things, because there's this idea in the mind that you don't really deserve to follow what's inspiring, right? And so I've seen it with others just delaying and delaying going for the inspiration. And, it's just so important to have this deep prayer constantly with the spirit to see what we're meant to be doing. And, I had a call yesterday with a person that reached out to me for some help. Yeah, I mean, decades of delaying inspiration, right? And so when it comes now, it's like, okay, you should have started it yesterday in a way, right? This is the most important thing. And, I like that you talked about time and spiritual teachings, really kind of going off the timeline. And all of this stuff is taking us off the timeline, and there's like all of this holographic through, through time and space healing that happens when we take these steps from the spirit. Sometimes it feels a bit like a game where you have different quests, different quests, and different little goals to accomplish. And to me, when I think about it like that, it actually feels really fun, and almost like I have a little like journal in my mind that's keeping track of some of the quests that are on my plate at the moment, and even giving little pointers for what the steps are, so I can get to the next little piece of the information that I need in order to complete the quest. Yeah, just having a little um, quest tracker in my mind actually feels really fun. But yeah, there have been times for me too, and several of them have been with Elisabeth, where I had been maybe delaying something, or I was just not treating what I was feeling with full responsibility, or yeah, this sense of maturity, where then it's almost like Elisabeth had to sit me down and be like, okay, here's the deal. here's what's in my mind. And if I'm hearing it, it means you've been hearing it, and probably ignoring it because it's now landing in my mind. And that's not something I enjoy. I'd rather just take the right step when I hear something. So it gets uncomfortable, like you said. But, for me too, I'm usually very open, even in those moments, and then just swiftly move on with things and take the steps that I need to take. Yeah, give the guidance the respect and honor that it really deserves.
As we opened up the talk, I was sort of seeing Tibetan monks. I've heard many of them say, it's a real gift, but also a crapshoot if you get a body to incarnate into. I always thought that was kind of interesting, and felt resonant with it. Like, use your time wisely was always their message. And I've been with a number of people at the end of their lives, and usually people who lived, fairly long lives. But I like the idea of a limited timeline as being a little bit of a pressure on us. And, I've watched people try to clean up their affairs, at the end of their lives. And it's a tough time to try to do that. Addressing your life in a manner where you've deferred it down the road it's a challenging way to go. And it's really pretty impossible spiritually to do it. I mean, yes, in this way, we're addressing things right outside of time in a seeming moment in time. So the miracle can happen anytime. Time can collapse on all these old, outdated pieces of information that we're working on resolving while we're here. But it's better to, like, sweep your doorstep every day. Do your housekeeping as you go along. And if you're surrounding yourself with people that are in their heart committed to their path, then good to listen up. I was having my friend who I met when I did the Peruvian shamanism. I didn't know anything about him, and I was engaging with him maybe a month into knowing him, asking him for some feedback. And a vision came in that it didn't mean anything to me, but it was about like the way that the men in his family had died for a few generations. And, the message that was given to him through me was, wake up, this is on your doorstep. And I ended up living with him for a time, renting a room from him. And almost every day I was saying something about doing like a liver cleanse or a gallbladder cleanse. I mean, it's all this body-based stuff, like every day. He ends up dying of this, and he ended up getting messages for 3 years about this. And his inability to hear what was being said, oh, I already dealt with this, it took him out. Maybe that's just the way it was going to go, right? But it seemed to me at the time because a couple very forceful messages about this came through, like, you've got to deal with it. It seems like we have opportunities to turn the ship, We don't have to have a collision course with stuff that seems to be in the world, but we also don't have to miss our opportunities for major awakening. The spirit is constantly trying to get through to us. And, if you haven't learned how to trust your intuition, if you haven't learned how to kind of read your own nonsense and BS, with the spirit, yeah, it can be confusing. But generally, these talks are not aimed towards people who are just getting on their path. Generally, these are the reminders for those of us that have been at this for a little while who just might need a little bit of a, hey, snap out of it. If you're hearing a message from somebody who you have a certain degree of trust from, take note. Take note. We're all meant to be messengers, and not everybody's got a clean, clear channel that they're delivering through. And we always have to run everything through our own discernment and our own filter and our own connection with the spirit. But it's good to listen to what you're hearing, run it through. Is there something in this for me? Does this resonate for me? A moment in time, the spirit's landing information on your doorstep. Take note.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff. I mean, it's not life or death for everybody, and for, each situation where there seems to be a little bit of pressure to get some spiritual work done, but it can turn out that way, right? For some people, that's the way it goes when messages from the spirit are denied and ignored. When we come with our own ideas and expectations and whatever it might be, then everything gets really convoluted. And I think a lot of the times it becomes pretty impossible to hear any guidance anymore. For me, being in touch with the spirit's guidance and what is meant for me is the most important thing. When things come in, either for myself or from someone else, it's usually pretty important that I follow through and take the steps. I just want to be happy and be in the channel and take the steps that are meant for me. I kind of want to go back to something that you said before we hit the record button, which was this idea that, everything is written, and it's almost like we're just following along in this script that's already set out for us. It seems like, we can choose at which point we say or do whatever is written in the script. I feel like there's certain bits like that. There's stuff that we can seem to want to figure out and put it on the timeline in spots as they feel right to us. And then there's other stuff that is simply non-negotiable, it seems, where it's, this is the way it's written and this is the way it actually needs to happen, so that the following pieces of the script can work and flow. Yeah, and it really can bring up a sense of pressure, but it seems like sometimes we do have to be squeezed through these little eyes of the needle, and there's always so many rewards on the other end when we do it. And the pressure a lot of the times is really just around the fact that we have delayed for a while. And I think it's a learning opportunity, because we can then take that forward and, like you said, keep the porch clean, sweep it every day. I think when we have a certain, almost like a daily, not ritual, but a daily maintenance, spiritual maintenance that we do, I think it's a little bit less likely that we will find ourselves where, in times where it feels like the pressure is really on to get stuff done. Yeah, I think, prayer time every day and checking in with the spirit and being curious about what can be done, small things every day that can be done spiritually. That's so helpful. That's so helpful.
Yeah, when we are really in that channel, right? That's when we're in that no time, no space, right? So when something drops in that's back on the timeline, it's because we have to navigate the timeline, right? That there's something that we need to know about to address. But when we have unfinished business, we're holding up the works, right? And I was just having this like last message of, we're not operating independently. I've seen in my own journey people that did not choose to go for the alignment, did not choose to answer the call that was there for them. And it delays things for others. And that's a whole other kettle of fish. Like, you don't really want to be the one holding up the works for the spirit. That's a really, really difficult place to be. There are forces at work trying to get everybody, right, to do their part in the way that is optimally going to serve. And if you're the one bucking the system, holding up countless elements of this orchestration, that's a lot of pressure. We're all part of this. We all have a part to play. We all have a role to play in every moment. And if we're cleaning out, if we're scouring the channel and doing the inner work, then we're going to be less stuck on having to dance out the timeline crap. And we're just going to be much more in the channel where we're being moved effortlessly. That's where I love to be, is not stuck in the mental construct and the figuring out and the idea of, is there a choice about anything and which way should I go? Should I go left or right? When I'm clean and clear, I'm just moved. That is grace and it's available, but I have to do my part to say to spirit, no, I'd rather have your way. We can choose that, or we can just be in our, what's it matter, belligerent, apathetic, whatever it's going to be. So much better to choose to say yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It is much easier, like you said, when we do take our rightful place in this awakening. And it is more fun when we consciously and continuously every day take the steps that we are given and follow the guidance that we hear. And it's meant to be sweet for us, and it can be. Well, thank you for joining me and exploring this idea. And thanks to anybody who's joined in, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.